Welcome to Kingdom Living with Jessie. This is Jessie Czebotar, and this is part of the Unveiling the Structures of the System course. This section is on positions, and it covers Intro to the Mothers of Darkness. So as we get started, we're going to look at the position title within the system called Mothers of Darkness, and we're going to begin to break down and look at how does this position work. In the first series of this course, The Structures of the System, you can see how the Mothers of Darkness position fits into the overall structure of the system. Let me quick go to a whiteboard here and just kind of give you a preview. In the series, I often use different symbols to explain the authorities, the contracts, the governance within the Luciferian Brotherhood and their sovereign military order. So in the first shows, I kind of break down the government structure of the Luciferian Brotherhood, and I like to show that symbol under one of their contracts, which is a right side up triangle. And that is known in the system as a holy contract. We also have connected to the governance side of the Luciferian Brotherhood, their sovereign military order. And I like to show that symbol as an upside down triangle, which is their unholy contract. Together, when these symbols are blended, it's important to understand how it plays a bigger picture into the system. But when you put these two symbols together, you get one of their seals, which is the seal of Israel. Why is that? That's because at the very top of the system, you have it broken into kind of two different governances. So you have what we call the old governance of the system, which was called Babylon. And Babylon was recognized by the color blue. And it showed that the majority of the financial backing connected to that was placed under the Vatican and the Holy See. Now, that's the old system. So everything prior to my generation was filed and financially overseen through that system. But what we saw happen this past year is that everything has shifted into the new system, and this new governance they've always been aware of. They've been preparing for it for a long time, but it's known as the Leviathan system, or the system of the beast. And it's recognized by the color red, and it's overseen by the Sanhedrin of Israel. So what we're going to see as we start to get into more and more of this series is we're going to see the old system, and we're going to see how everything is shifted into this new Leviathan system. So this is important as we begin to look at the Mother of Darkness position, because the Mothers of Darkness played a pivotal role in that shift. Their whole job was to oversee the entirety, the governance of the system, and to make sure that everything was ready and prepared for as the shift happened, the shift would occur, and that everything would be placed from the mother's hands into the hands of those who are going to usher in the system of the beast. Now, there were things that occurred in that. This was part of my position, so which the Lord delivered me out of with a mighty hand when I was 10 years old. So, as we begin to look at this, we're going to kind of understand more of how these mothers of darkness operate. So, with the mothers of darkness, they have many titles. As we look at their titles, you get things like, your mothers of darkness. Sometimes they're just called mothers. You do have the real mothers of darkness. Their faces are not known within the system. They do have quadrant leaders called grand high priestesses who also were given these titles of mother of darkness and could serve as a face front for the mothers of their quadrant if they needed to be called on to do so. So there are times that you'll see the quadrant grand high priestesses with that same title, but their positions are a little different. Their governance and authority varies from these top 5 mothers of darkness. Out of these mothers, you kind of have them segregated. So you have 3 of those mothers that are set apart from the others. They're known as the crone, the maid, and the maiden. And what they represent is the threefold imagery of the female goddess Isis. They also can bear the title Ashtaroth, which is, the female deity that they are representing. They also can be called Ashtar, Jezebel, Lilith. So they can go by many names. And in fact, each of these names are titles. They are the title for the top mother of darkness. So out of those 3, the position of the crone is also known as the queen mother of darkness. And that individual's titles, which that was the position I was chosen for, some of the other names for that position are the Queen of Heaven or the Queen of the Dead. That position also can be called Isis, Ashtaroth, Ashtar, Jezebel, Lilith. The names go on and on, as you'll see as we go on further here, but it's important to understand how these names interconnect, who they represent, and to understand that each of these names go along with a contract that the individuals who hold those positions are in charge of overseeing. So they're interchangeable with, position titles, contracts, and the authorities that come with those positions and titles. You also get one more name that we can add up here, and that could be Hecate Hecate. So you can have different spellings of Hecate that go along with that. So you'll see a lot of the imagery interchanged, and you also can have Hecate as well. So you'll see a lot of that interchangeable within the system. Now, it's important to understand that each of these positions and titles, within them, there is a duality built in within the system where you always have a light and a dark side. So even within the positions of the mother of darkness, you're going to see that duality of both a light side and a dark side. So therefore, each of these 5 mothers are going to have light side title names. They also will have dark side title names that go with their position. And in this, their main job for the system is to oversee Lucifer's agenda in the system. That primary agenda that Lucifer has is to get all the spiritual gates to open, to have an army of humans that can be possessed by his demonic generals, And as those gates are all opened, he wants to get that army through those gates to be able to usurp the throne of God. Now, originally that was his plan all along with the fallen angels that were cast out of heaven with him. But what happened was when they attempted to usurp the throne of God, they were cast down. And because of that, the fallen ones lost their ability to go back into the heavenly places. Because of that, they have to come up with a bypass, a different way of doing things. Who has authority to enter boldly before the throne of grace? That's humans. And that right was secured for us by Jesus Christ, by his death on the cross, that we can now come boldly before the throne of grace. So Lucifer's plan is that if he can get his generals to possess humans who have that right and authority to go boldly before the throne, then he can get his hosts into heaven and attempt to usurp the throne of God. Now we know, according to the book of Revelations, that is not going to happen. They're not even going to get a toe into the throne room, but they certainly are going to try. So as we look further at this, let me go to another screen share here. So as we're looking at this, you know that there's threefold imagery as well as a fivefold imagery to the mothers of darkness. We know that those mothers have a light side image and names that go along with that light side image. We also know that they have a dark side image, and there is a purpose and a reason for everything within that as to why they have a light side and a dark side imagery. Now, let's look at first, before we get into more of what their position entails, let's look at, how are these women chosen for this position? Their main job is going to be to oversee Lucifer's agenda and the system. And you're going to, we'll get into how that's broken up. Let me go back to the whiteboard here. As we look at this, we see that these mothers of darkness, that they're going to be in charge of different parts of the system. You have the Queen Mother of Darkness, whose job is to oversee the entire system. Now, when we look at how that system is broken up, I kind of want you to imagine a map of the United States and a map of the entire world. How their positions and authorities work is that, they will be given authority over a quadrant. So each of the four other mothers is going to have jurisdiction over a quadrant, whether that's north, south, east, or west within the United States, or a quadrant international, let me say that again. They'll have a jurisdiction over a quadrant in the United States, as well as a quadrant within internationally within the world, again, north, south, east, west. Each of them are going to be assigned a quadrant, and within that, you'll have the Queen Mother of Darkness, whose job will be to oversee the entire thing. Now, this quadrant jurisdiction can be displayed several ways. One of the ways that they like to display it is like in the sign of an altar. What does that go back to? We're going to get into that. I call it the encampment of Israel symbology. But that can be one way that their jurisdiction is recognized. Another way is, more common. They'll use the imagery of a monarch or a butterfly. They also can take just that image that's, similar to the butterfly, and you might see it like this, where it is representative of the Garden of Eden with, you might see the tree of life here, or it might just be an empty space with the four rivers flowing in and throughout that river. And sometimes they'll connect that middle piece. Now, this also can be seen in the imagery of the left sphere and the right sphere of the brain, and those being divided, representing the middle part, representing, the contracts with that fifth mother, and then each of the mothers having a portion or a part. How are their positions chosen? These positions are passed down generationally and by prophecy. Each child that is chosen to be a mother of darkness is hand selected by Lucifer, the oracles, the magi, and the diviners within the system. Now, the oracles and the magi, their job in the system has been to masterfully collect all of the scrolls and all the prophetic divinations through time. Some of those prophetic divinations come straight from books in heaven, where scripture tells us that the Lord has written and prepared. He's prepared good works for us in advance. So they're looking at those things, trying to figure out the times, the seasons, the events, and the destinies that intersect with the times, the seasons, and the events that the occult wants to impact, right? They don't want any of us doing the good works that God has prepared in advance for us to do. So part of their job is to figure out who's prepared for what works, and how can they try to thwart, prevent, or hinder that destiny so that it does not work out for God's advantage. So they've searched out these women who were to be the mothers of darkness. And, from the moment children are born, they're looking at the prophecies, they're looking at the family lines, they're looking through scrolls, books, different destinies that they have. And, they're asking, is this the one who was chosen for this time, this place, and this event? So again, the mothers of darkness are children that are hand selected by Lucifer, the oracles, the magi, and the diviners in the system. Let's look at their scope of authority. Why are there three mothers of darkness singled out? Let me quick erase some of this here. So we're going to look at how do they work and operate? Why are things the way that they are? So within the system, you have different symbols that recognize different authorities. So one of those is what we call the three Roman colonnades. And this image can look like colonnades, Roman colonnades with toppers on it, or it could simply just be three lines that you see. And you'll see this imagery of the three chord contract used a lot in different forms of Solomonic magic. And where it connects to is that this goes back to Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 21. And each of these pillars in the Solomonic contract represent one of those verses out of Exodus 14. So you have one representing Exodus 19, one representing Exodus 20, and the other representing Exodus 21. And what those verses represent is the power of God, and the power that he has as Lord of the host to control a heavenly army of hosts in order to display his power, his wonder, his works. So in this, then going back to King Solomon, King Solomon found that these three, or maybe let me put it another way, King Solomon, it's taught that King Solomon understood that these three verses, when written out a certain way in their Hebrew form, give you all 72 names of the 72 authorities in the spirit world that he made contracts with. We find those authorities and powers, principalities, and spiritual forces named in the Keys of Solomon, known as the 72 Keys of Solomon. Another name that we could use for those are demonic authorities. And they outline how Lucifer's army works. So you have principalities. Those principalities are like generals in Lucifer's army. Then underneath them, you have commanders. Underneath those, you have sub-commanders. And then under those sub-commanders, you have hordes of unclean spirits that are the bulk of Lucifer's army. So, where this connects with the mothers of darkness then is that, this symbol represents their authority and connection, to the system over hosts of heaven. They're going to call them hosts of heaven, but it's different from, the angelic hosts. You've got those that are the fallen hosts. So that's what they have authority over. These contracts represent contracts between the mothers of darkness and Lucifer's army. And those contracts are between the physical and the spiritual world. Some other ways that we may see this contract, another way, like on a lot of their books, you'll see it written, you'll have something in the middle there. It could be a head, it could be a flame, it could be a Hebrew yod. And then you're going to see wings here, representing the threefold structure of the system. This middle part representing the order of Melchizedek, this left part representing the order of the Phoenix, and the right part representing the order of the Golden Dawn. Now, it's important to understand that this imagery, these contracts within the system, these symbols used have layers. So this is just one meaning of these layers and how that meaning connects to the mothers of darkness. You get these hosts of heaven that they have authority over. They also can be called different names within the system. Those 72 powers and authorities can be called the seas. The top among them, the main 7 or 9 principalities, can be called the 7 seas. So they can be known as the seas. If it says the 7 seas, that's going to refer to the top. They also can be represented as a diamond, which I show in my coaching courses. And you'll see, the major principalities, and you'll read them on some of the different city sigils and territories like a clock. So, if you have marking up here at the 12 o'clock, which, this threefold contract is also seen in this diamond, it would be, seen like this. So up here at the 12 o'clock, you would have Avedon. Between the 1 and the 2, you would have Baal. At the 3 o'clock, you're going to have Molech. Between the 4 and the 5, you'll have Baphomet. At the 6 o'clock, you'll have Leviathan. At the 7 to 8 o'clock, you'll have Azazel. At the 9 o'clock, you'll have Toth. And at the 10 to 11, you'll have Samael. And right there in the middle, you have Ashtaroth. So when they're reading these polls, they're also going to see that same imagery. Up here at the 12 o'clock, you have the contract with Avedon. Here in the middle, you have a contract with Ashtaroth. And here at the bottom is their contract with Leviathan. So if they just, in the system, if they just see a straight line like that, they're going to read it as that contract with those three main principalities. If there's other imagery there, then they're going to add in different principalities. Like here it would be Molech, or here it would be Toth. So this is a way that they communicate who's connected to what principalities and authorities and the jurisdiction that they oversee in connection to those contracts. Each of those, each of these quadrants is going to have a mother who's connected to it. So, you'll have the north, and you'll have a mother in both areas in charge of the north. You've got the east, and you'll have a mother um connected to each of those. Then you've got the south, and there's a mother of darkness connected to each of those, and you have a west and a mother of darkness connected to each of those. And then you have the fifth mother of darkness overseeing everything. um each of these In each of these quadrants, the mothers will oversee and are going to be placed under what they call a cherubic sign. So in this, you have at the very top, over the eastern quadrant, let me find another, see if I can get that to place here. Over the eastern quadrant, you're going to have the cherubic sign of the lion. Over the southern quadrant, you're going to have the cherubic sign of the man. And in the western quadrant, you're going to have the cherubic sign of the ox. Now, these cherubic signs also could be displayed as not just an eagle, but you could have another way that they'll show that cherubic sign is through the gospel writers. So connected to the eagle, you're going to have John. Connected to the lion, you will have Mark. Then connected to the man, you're going to have Matthew. And connected to the ox, you would have Luke. So either, in part of this, understanding the signs that they use to represent these territories and authorities, you'll see a cherubic sign or a gospel writer sign in connection. So each of the mothers, the one for the north, some of her symbol is going to be the eagle or in connection to John. And this gets into, as they're marking their territories, this can get into some of the labeling over the diocese or the parish areas, or the churches. They'll put them under a sign. The same with their educational departments. In the east, that mother will be connected to the cherubic sign of the lion or to the gospel writer Mark. In the south, that mother will be connected to the cherubic sign of the man or the gospel writer Matthew. And to the west, that mother will be connected to the cherubic sign of the ox or the gospel writer Luke. Now, this is not the only thing that, they're representing. So what is really behind all this? So this is where we get into one of the images for the mother, which is going to be the square altar. They'll just know that this is what this represents. Altars were places in scripture that would be built up in Israel on the high places, or even in the Canaanite religions, they would build altars upon which they would sacrifice. But those altars were not just representing places of sacrifice, they really represented contracts with these spiritual deities. So these altars, even with the mothers, represent contracts. And as we look at this, it's important to understand that these altars are representative of the layout of the camp of Israel, that's God's design. And by his order, that was how he commanded things should be laid out. That in the center, you have the things of God, the most sacred, the most holy things. What was put there in the camps of Israel was the Ark of the Covenant. That was the place where God's presence would dwell. What does the system put there in that center imagery? It's the goddess, Ashtaroth, right? So that's where you get some of the contract with Ashtaroth in the most sacred place. Then around the edges, you would get the different camps of Israel. They were laid out by north, east, south, and west. Now, in this, the system connects to this imagery. This imagery really is foundational to the system and their different contracts. But, as this is read, they're not just going to be looking at an altar or looking at this image representing the houses of Israel. Over it, they're going to see all these inlays that represent different times, seasons, and events. And those inlays that they're going to see over this are the zodiacs. So, they're going to have several different zodiacs. They're not just going to have the zodiacs, they also are going to have, let me maybe put the encampment first. So they see the encampment with the tent layout for the houses of Israel. And what's important to understand about that is that God's design for this was the calendar and the calendar of harvest, that the houses of Israel would be connected with the harvest of Israel. So, this imagery can be literally read like a clock and read in times and seasons. So, therefore, the system wants to destroy the houses of Israel as God designed it. Why? Because it goes with God's inheritance and his blessings for his people. It also goes with his storehouses and his provisions. So they want to give false, false overlays to God's design. So therefore, the first false overlay is going to be the Chinese zodiac, and that is going to be, based on years. And then they're going to overlay also the Egyptian zodiac, the Mayan calendar, as well as you'll have the regular zodiac. And in that, they overlay to each of those houses a false house, a false fruit, a false harvest. And in that, because there isn't true harvest or life or blessing in the Lord, in that they overlay false treasures, false inheritances, and ultimately death, leading to non-fruit bearing lives. So that's kind of part of the whole goal in this. So beyond the houses of Israel, that's based off of a paternal structure where you have the men in the system represented. But what is hidden in this, that those at the top of the system are aware of, is that each of these houses, false houses, really is representative of the mothers of Israel. So at the north, you have two mothers of Israel. You have Zilpah and Bilhah. You have to the east, Leah, and to the south, you have Zilpah and Leah. And to the west, you have Rachel. So, they'll see these mothers, which also part of the light side of the mothers of darkness, they each will have one of these names of the mothers of Israel. So you'll see that where they carry these names and can be known also on the light side as one of the mothers of Israel. Let's get into their light side names. So for their light side names, the Queen Mother of Darkness, her names are always usually going to be connected to corporate, to the system as a whole. So the light side name for the Queen Mother of Darkness is going to be America. That's taken from some different words. It goes back, the A representing a type, Mary being connected to the water, Merrick being very specific, connected to some other words, which literally mean I am Mary. It's going to be a type of waters that is fashioned in that form in the image of Mary. That's basically what that name comes from. Therefore, you'll also see that Queen Mother of Darkness, her titles being the Queen of Heaven, which we also see being used in the Jesuit Catholic churches as a title for Mother, the Mary of Christ. That imagery that they want you to believe is based off of the biblical stories, because that's the light side cover. They want you to believe that they worship Jesus Christ. But in that imagery, notice how they use that imagery. We know scripture says that there is no other name in heaven or earth by which a man can be saved, the name of Yeshua, right? And that his name is above every other name. Yet what do they do in their imagery? They put the image of Christ as an infant. They'll place him in the arms of Mary, and in that, they raise her head above his. That's very significant. So it's not done as a beautiful thing, it's done as a mockery, putting the divine female above the name of Christ within the system. So America is just another name in that same way. It's putting a name above something that belongs to God and was created for him. Some of the other names for that Queen Mother of Darkness that go in line with that could be Fatima, but you'll see that same imagery used. The other four mothers, you'll have one who's known either as Sophia or Wisdom. In the 1970s, the mother who is known as Sophia got out of the system. She was released and escaped, and they allowed her to live as long as she, remained silent about everything. And they inserted somebody else into that position as Sophia or Wisdom. Another name for the next mother is going to be in connection with justice. And go ahead and insert pictures there for Sophia and justice. The fourth mother is going to be known as freedom. And the fifth mother is going to be known as liberty. Now, each of their light side names are going to be connected to the cover of their light side, which is meant to, give this guise that they are engaged in good humanities, those humanities being connected to that light side name. And you'll see, a lot of hidden money invested that goes along with their authority over these areas. So, wisdom is going to be connected to things like the universities. They'll put that mother's name over the universities, the educational system, libraries, things like that. Justice is going to be over, law, over the courts. So a lot of times you'll see that symbology of justice in connection to um, courthouses or things related connected to law. Freedom, a lot of times they're going to put that almost over land and territories. So you'll see it in connection like to the Native American reservations. You'll see freedom connected to different activist groups, those that are going to go over and help when there's devastation or destruction to areas like humanitarian green efforts. You'll see a lot of freedom in connection with that. You also will see freedom in connection with the Native American things, including, the orphanages and the Jesuit Catholic schools would be over that. And then you'll see liberty as a whole over certain areas, territories, representing, that individual's authority over those areas. So that would be how you see the light side being used. So then you also have the mother's dark side names. The first one is the Queen Mother of Darkness is going to be known as a whole. She'll be known as Babylon. Again, you'll see that imagery connected to Babylon, the imagery of Jezebel, the imagery that comes from the book of Revelations as the whore of Babylon, all of that end time symbology. You'll see that imagery of a woman with a big chalice or cup receiving the wrath of God. So that's the imagery that you'll see. Then you'll see the next one will be seen as Lilith, also known in Jewish history as the first wife of Adam. So each of these mothers of darkness, will be connected to various things based on this name. It goes along with their contracts, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So you have Lilith, you have Agarat, you have Isis, and the last one is you have Neema. Each of these images, the light side, are going to deal with contracts. So, those contracts will be connected to a main altar, altars at different places, locations. So each of those altars are going to be connected to the high places or the high peaks. And the mothers will oversee the contracts of the high places. And then each of those are also going to be connected to the four major abysses of hell, or the lower abysses is kind of what they'll call them. So, the Queen Mother's going to be contracted with all of these places, these locations, and also will carry all of these names. And, how does that look? When they're taking the contracts, that altar is seen as a throne. Literally, the mother will sit on it, with her kind of bum in the middle and her legs on each side and her hands on these sides, which represent chains. And they will place ribbons around representing these contracts up and down the extremities. So you'll also have, like ribbons placed around the middle sections too, different colored ribbons. and they'll declare those names as they're tying the ribbons around the extremities. So they'll have, you know, like as they did like Lilith, they would have, you know, your right arm up on the altar here, and they would tie the ribbons around and declare that contract with Lilith. All of these, there's certain words that they will say, and you can find those in the book Kabbalah of the Golden Dawn and their imagery with those contracts. So with the contracts connected to that. So then they would go ahead with the contracts to your right arm, and then your left leg and your right leg. And in all of that, you know, there's going to be other overlaying contracts, because as you're sitting on that altar, you know, they see that main pillar contract there. So there'll also be a contract held in there with Abaddon, Ashtaroth, and Leviathan. And then, you know, they also see other contracts. In that Golden Dawn book, you'll see two layers to that altar. You have the outer layer, which represents the contracts with the name, but then you also have powers and authorities that hold those contracts. So you'll have one here and one here representing those line contracts. The top line being to Samael, the middle line being to Ashtaroth, and that bottom line being connected to Asmodai. The mothers will be contracted to all of those principalities, powers. That will be, you know, the next step in their contracting, and then they'll have those other two lines in connection with the armies and the militaries will be taken at the outsides of the altar, both for the high places as well as for the abyss contracts that they consider are the hell contracts. Now, each of these names also go along with their duties in the contract and their scope of power, or better put, their illusion of power. Again, you know, the light side names are going to go with their humanitarian efforts, which are going to be connected to the promise of wisdom, justice, freedom, or liberty, while in guise, you know, they're ushering in devastation and destruction, like things like pestilence, famine, unjust scales, earthquakes, death, and devastation. Everything is an illusion. You know, the light side of the system, mother's names represent life, and, you know, life, basically all of those things, wisdom, justice, freedom, and liberty, are connected to our right to life, God-given authority that we have to live, while their dark side contracts are connected to death. And, you know, in that, part of those dark side duties that they have is to usher in ungodliness or lawlessness, unbelief, unrepentance, and pride. So those are the things that's part of their job, to usher in those things. In this, all of these contracts are bound under sorcery, divination, and forms of witchcraft. So that's all part of the illusion. You know, the mothers in that, you know, the part of their job is to meet with Lucifer to get his agenda for the quadrants each day, and then to give their commands to the quadrant leaders under them, who are going to be connected to the councilmen in the system. And then in that, they're going to be the ones working with their quadrant leaders to, you know, discern the positions within the system. So, they choose children, whether those children are considered hierarchy or expendable. As a child, I witnessed this happen at what looked like field trips for school. It could be anywhere. It could be museums. You could have it happen at different carnivals or different gatherings, different field trips. But I witnessed it particularly at field trips to the Frank Lloyd Wright houses, where they would have all these groups of students coming in with teachers. The students would be standing in lines behind a teacher. A mother of darkness would walk past that line. If she nodded her head, it meant that that child had been chosen as a hierarchy child, which means that they were chosen for some position in the system to keep the system going. If she held up a finger, that meant that child was expendable, and then they would be bought, sold, and traded for sex, for sexual ritual, for cannibalism, to be turned into a diamond when they could no longer be used as those things. And then their ashes and remains would be sold cursed to our food and our pharmacia companies. So part of their other part is to oversee end time events, which are going, and rituals, which are going to be part of the ushering in of the Antichrist, and to hand the authority of the Babylon system over to the Antichrist. That was one of their end time jobs that they were to do. The mothers of darkness are also in charge of the ritual walls and the quantum currencies that are connected to those. So that's part of the financial aspect that is not physical. We begin to get into the spiritual currencies. So they're going to oversee, in connection with the walls, the physical currency of the handprints or the fingerprints, which is connected to the works of our hands that God has designed for us to do in advance. They're also going to oversee the blood contracts, our social security or numerical numbers. They're going to be connected to that. They'll be connected to the DNA, as well as the foot or the sole prints, which are taken for most children in the hospitals when they're born. And then you also have the descendant rights, which are going to be the vaults where they keep eggs and sperm. I've talked about in some of my shows about some of these quantum currencies, how they work, some of the locations. So you get, where they set up different vaults to hold some of these currencies, or have ways to, you've got underground banks that are basically, quantum currency banks. They don't work and operate off of money at all. One of the big vaults for the descendant rights is under the Pentagon, and you have vaults where they have the eggs and the sperm. One of the things that they'll do, especially like where you have aborted babies, if that baby is a girl, before they utterly destroy that infant, if they want the descendant rights, they will remove the eggs from that infant before they continue destroying the rest of the body. And they will preserve those eggs in these vaults, and may use them for different experimentation purposes. They may create souls to be able to do soul torture and soul capture. So they'll do different things with those descendant rights. The mothers of darkness are required to attend 4 rituals a year. The rituals that they are required to attend are Easter, Halloween, Christmas, and one of the equinoxes, either the spring or the fall equinox. Lucifer also will attend those rituals based on which quadrant they're in for those 4 rituals a year. it's important to recognize that the mothers of darkness, even though they appear to have this illusion of great authority and power, that really they are just normal women. There's nothing special about them. There aren't any magical powers that they possess or hold. Everything that they can do comes through their contracts with demonic spirits and principalities and authorities. These women are bound or chained to those authorities. And in that binding or chaining, they're captives to these principalities, and particularly they're captives to Lucifer. Um, you know, their godhood and their authority comes only by pride. They're too proud to repent. Therefore, they remain captive under Lucifer. So I hope you enjoyed this series. Let me quick stop the screen share for one moment here. As we go back, I hope you are enjoying this series, and I want to encourage you to go to my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. The class is part of the series Unveiling the System, which you can find under the courses and classes button. On there, you'll also see a bunch of the other courses that I have done, including the Foundations of Kingdom Living, Rise of the Righteous, Beautifully Adorned, Decode series, which I have under the Chicago Decode. Also, I periodically hold coachings, which I encourage you to check out. There's only a select number of people that can attend those coachings, but they are free. Right now, we have available coaching land 1, coaching land assignments 2, and coaching land assignments 3. This next year, we will be putting out coaching land assignment 4. So I encourage you to catch those while you can. Coaching sessions are always free as long as is available. And you are welcome to attend as many as you would like. Their purpose is to help people to understand how the system is working at regional and quadrant levels, to help you develop abilities and skills in recognizing their signs, their symbols in your regional areas, and helping you develop prayer strategies to put into operation to tear down the strongholds of wickedness in your areas and rebuild the church as the Lord has designed it to work and operate. So I want to thank you for attending this class, and we'll see you next time.